This is Adam Schindler. Today, Chad Wolf and I will sit down with the senior pastor of Free Chapel, Pastor Jensen Franklin, to discuss a broad range of topics, including the Christmas season. Welcome to The Tank.
Coming to you from our nation's capital, this is The Tank, your voice in Washington, D.C. and around the country. Broadcasting from the America First Policy Institute offices in D.C., this is the premier think tank podcast where we discuss the challenges facing our nation, talk policy, and advance America First solutions. Welcome to The Tank.
Hello, this is Chad Wolf.
And this is Adam Schindler.
Coming up, we're going to sit down with Pastor Franklin. But first, let me welcome you to the show, Adam. Adam Schindler is filling in for Hogan Gidley. Hogan is likely off getting his hair done, so we'll have to see about that when he comes back.
He does his hair?
He does. Well, he probably has others do his hair, but we can get into that. Adam is the Chief Digital Officer here at the America First Policy Institute, but probably more specifically for this conversation is also ordained pastor and is very involved in the faith community. So with Pastor Franklin on and some of the other topics, we thought that this was a perfect time to get Adam on the show, and we're glad that you're here. So let me just kind of jump right into it. You did mention, obviously, we've got the Christmas season. This will be our last episode before we break for the holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And so there's not a better guest that we will have on than Pastor Franklin to talk about. He talks a little bit about the message of Christmas and what his congregation is most concerned about these days. So I think it's going to be a great conversation. But we do certainly want to wish everyone out there a very Merry Christmas. We hope that you all get time with your loved ones, family members, and perhaps those that you just haven't seen in a long time, and be able to share the Christmas season, Christmas message with them. So Merry Christmas to all. But let me jump in here, Adam. Obviously, I think there's a lot going on, not only across the country and specifically here in D.C., but one thing that has caught a lot of attention here of late is the fact that we had 3 different university presidents testifying before Congress regarding anti-Semitism on college campuses, specifically the University of Penn, Harvard University, and MIT, Massachusetts Institute for Technology. And to say that the the hearing went a little sideways, I think is probably an understatement.
Yes.
I think most of it centered around a simple question that they got from Elise Stefanik, Congressman Stefanik from upstate New York.
Yeah, she was great.
Basically just said, and she was like, yes or no, which didn't really happen, right? We went into this long explanation, which I think have gotten all 3 of these presidents in some hot water. But I think the basic question, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, is does calling for the genocide of the Jewish people violate UPenn, Harvard, or MIT's code of conduct?
Yeah.
And it was remarkable that they simply couldn't answer yes. I think for most Americans, the answer should be yes, absolutely.
Of course. What's there to think about? I mean, calling for the genocide violates code of conduct, I think that they were concerned about answering because they didn't like the framing of the question, because nobody is standing up at Harvard or MIT or UPenn and calling for using those words. But we know why the calling for genocide is being highlighted by Congresswomen, because they're using the phrase, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free.
Or intifada, right?
Or intifada. That is specifically violent attacks. That's not spiritual or theological resistance. That's a physical attack, language. And if you push Israel from the River Jordan into the Mediterranean Sea, if you get rid of that, that's the entire Jewish state. So that chant is a call for genocide of the Jewish people. There's no other options, and they didn't want to respond to that or validate that.
I think that's right. And, they started talking about First Amendment, right? And I think everyone, most of our listeners and everyone else can get behind, the First Amendment. It's a core tenet and principle of the United States and being American. But what we've seen time and time again on these campuses is they're not about free speech. They're about free speech if the views align with their views, right? We can point out time again when conservative speakers are denied access to these campuses, or they're canceled, or members from the Trump administration, former members of the Trump administration, get invited and then get canceled time and time again. So this idea of free speech and them hiding behind it, I think, in some respects is a little bit of a red herring. It doesn't, it's not, there's a lot of hypocrisy there.
Yeah. And it's not like this specific issue is a political issue. Thousands of Israelis were massacred in a small amount of time by an enemy of their state. And the United States higher education is allowing the support of that on their campuses. And so it's not just a political issue. You know, General Kellogg here at AFPI, a great 3-star, he's saying all the time that never again is now. And it's a different moment when you're protesting a political issue and you're protesting a state's right to defend themselves against the largest massacre of Jewish life since the Holocaust.
That's right. And so why were the university presidents up there? Because I think, well, I know I should say, we've seen a number of troubling incidents on a number of different college campuses since October the 7th, where Jewish students, I would say, have been specifically targeted, right? Some are having to hide in classrooms and closets because, you know, there's an angry set of other students that are threatening violence against them, right? We have a couple of polls here that say 73% of Jewish students have seen an increase of anti-Semitic behavior on their college campuses since the year began, and specifically since October the 7th. So it's not anything that people are just conjuring up or believing in their mind. I think there's some hard evidence out here that what's going on some of these college campuses, specifically some of these Ivy Leagues, is very, very concerning. And now you have boosters and you have folks that donate to these institutions that are now saying, whoa. We've gone way too far. This whole woke mentality has gone so far, and they're actually calling for fewer donations or to pull back donations. And we've had the University of Pennsylvania's president resign, I think, largely because of that.
Yep, that's right. You start losing donors and you're in a big trouble. And these are not just, you know, academic institutions. These are the cream of the crop. These are the schools that,
in theory.
Well, they're supposed to be, right?
Right.
You know, go Aggies. But these are the organizations that are crafting the worldviews of the next generation of leadership, supposedly,
right.
You know, and they can't even stand on basic moral issues without moral clarity. And these are not historic pro-life issues or social problems. This is about the murder of Jews, and they can't even stand for that. And it makes you very concerned about, you know, the systemic health of these organizations.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think a lot of Americans have seen this bubbling up on college campuses for some time. AFPI has written about it.
Right.
Others have written about this progressive woke mentality in higher education. And what I would say to some of these donors who are now very vocal about what's going on and like I said, pulling back some of their donations, I would say, welcome to the fight. You know, where have you been?
Right.
Where have you been for the past 5, 6, 8 years?
We're glad to have you.
Yeah, but this isn't. Yes, this puts a spotlight on what's going on in university campuses, but it's not. It didn't just happen since the October the 7th. These types of viewpoints indoctrinating students has been ongoing for some time. So I'm glad that, in a sense, I'm not really glad at any of this, that it's shown a light on what's going on, and so it's getting a lot of attention, as it should.
Yeah, this was a dividing line, and tragedy and blatant evil divides light from dark, right from wrong, and it's doing that here at the university level.
It's quite remarkable. We'll see where this goes. I think the Harvard president is staying in her seat, at least for the time being. I'm not sure we've heard about MIT, but there's probably some more to play out on this issue, because I think, again, some of the donors and boosters to some of these schools are still very angry about what's going on. But let's transition here a little bit, and let's talk a little bit more about faith in sort of people's faith, their views, and how they bring that to public life. And we've got a new Speaker of the House, right? He's not new any longer. He's been there now probably a month or so. Mike Johnson, he's from Louisiana, talks openly about his faith. Obviously Christian, talks openly about his faith as it relates to a number of policy positions that he does. And guess what? He's been attacked.
Yep.
Shocker.
Yeah.
Shocker, shocker, right? He's been attacked by the media, calling him all sorts of names, including Christian nationalists and all these other things. So I guess my question to you, Adam, given obviously you're, as I mentioned earlier, an ordained and have been in this faith community, why is the left so afraid of people that have these public positions? So whether you're in Congress or, you're another elected official somewhere else, that you talk about your faith, why are they so afraid of that?
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that people that read the Bible and hold a biblical worldview have a worldview that's very different than what the left is advocating. And you can talk about faith and politics as long as you talk about God or you talk about religion. But the moment someone like Speaker Johnson says, if you want to know what I believe, read the Bible, the biblical worldview is very different than sometimes what the religious worldview of a generic Christian may be seen and perceived as. So that's a dividing line for someone like Johnson, where he's not just a Christian, he's someone that believes in the Bible and openly says, I believe in the Bible. Because a biblical worldview understands that God created male and female. There's only two genders. A biblical worldview recognizes Israel's historic right to exist. There's no moral equivocation there. A biblical worldview understands that fathers and mothers in the house are the only way to raise a life-giving family situation. And all of those things are against the left-wing party and their values for America. So biblical values are a threat to that agenda. And the America First agenda is founded in those Judeo-Christian biblical ideals. And as we look through our 10 guiding pillars, our agenda items, and connect those up to the biblical foundations of what we're doing, and Pastor Franklin will talk some about that, biblical values are an America First agenda.
Yeah. No, it's such a good point. And, a lot of what we do here at the America First Policy Institute are based on those biblical values, right? We have a biblical foundations project, which I'd like you to comment on. I know Pastor Franklin does as well here in the interview coming up. But it's such a core tenet of what we do here at AFPI. And I think it's a little unique. I don't know that a lot of our groups are connecting a positive policy agenda for the country across a multitude of issues and connecting those to the biblical foundations and where they sort of originated from. Right. So talk just a little bit about kind of that initiative and that project here at AFPI.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very well known if you're a student of history that the United States was founded on a Judeo-Christian worldview. You've got Moses and the Ten Commandments all throughout the United States capitals and the facades, carved into stone as a chief lawmaker and lawgiver. Our founders understood that the constitutional republic that was getting set up was, quote, wholly inadequate to governing an immoral people or a people absent God. Our foundation requires that individuals have a connection to God. And so this is not something unique to AFPI, right? This is 250 plus years old. And what we're saying is we don't have to put our faith on the sideline, right? We're not a faith organization, but faith is in our organization because it's in our nation, because it's in good government. And so the Biblical Foundations Project is just helping articulate what the biblical foundation are for the policy agenda that AFPI has created and compiled and is now advocating for at every level, state, local, and federal. What are the biblical framework to understand why do we need a strong border? What does the Bible say? It doesn't say something about homeland security, but it does talk about immigration. It talks about, loving the orphan and the widow and caring for the poor. And how do we understand the economy from a biblical perspective? We've done that for life. The faith movement has for 50 years advocated for pro-life based on the biblical foundations of their understanding. But can we do that for the economy? Can we do it for border security? Can we do it for national security? And that's what the Biblical Foundations Project is all about as we continue to create more and more content around that.
Well, we're really excited about that project, that initiative. We've seen just a tremendous amount of positive momentum, input, reaction to as we've rolled that out in a couple of different places. I know the folks that follow AFPI are very excited about it, but we've heard from folks that may not be reading everything that we do day in and day out, but they're saying, hey, this is some interesting work, and we haven't thought about these big public policy issues in this way using our faith. So I think it's really, really important. Again, it's going to be a center of focus for us here at AFPI going forward. But Pastor Franklin does talk a little bit about this.
Yeah.
So I think let's just jump right in. Let's pull him in and let's get him started because he's a great individual and he's got a lot of wisdom. Pastor is a senior pastor of Free Chapel. It's a multi-campus church with campuses throughout the South, Georgia, South Carolina, and California, so not necessarily the South. Pastor's messages influence generations through modern-day technology, digital media. He even has a television broadcast, Kingdom Connection. New York Times bestseller, speaks at conferences worldwide. He and his wife reside in Georgia, have 5 children, 5 grandchildren. I've gotten to know Pastor Jensen over the last couple of years here being at AFPI. He's a great friend of the organization. Just received a very prestigious award from AFPI in the last couple of weeks. Just a great individual, great person. Every time I talk to him, I feel like I get smarter. So, Pastor Jensen, welcome to the Tank.
Thank you so much, Chad and Adam. It's great to be with you, and it's great to know about and be a part of AFPI. I think it's critically important now what you guys are doing, and appreciate you.
Well, great. We appreciate that, and the work that you do with AFPI, and obviously your son, Drake, is such an important member of the AFPI team. So everything that you and your family do, we say thank you for it. So we're just going to jump in. We've got a lot to cover, so I just want to kind of jump in. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world these days, from overseas to what's going on in Israel, to not only, but also what's going on here in the U.S., whether it's the inflation that we see stuff going on the border. We talk about the radical left trying to sexualize our children. You can look across a variety of different areas. As a pastor, I just really wanted to ask you, because, presumably you deal with a variety of these issues every day in talking to your folks. But how do you really instill, sort of hope and sort of, I'm not going to say clarity, it's probably the wrong word, but really hope in the hearts of your congregation during some difficult times and some difficult issues that people are dealing with?
Well, for me as a pastor, I think what the world needs right now is a clear voice and clear direction from God's word. I don't get political when I'm in the pulpit. I am biblical. I preach what the Bible says. The Bible has answers to everyday life. The Bible has answers to politics, to every area from family to morality. All of it is found in the scriptures. And so I feel that's my job. And I also believe that in times like these, we're not just called to be people who curse the darkness. We need to turn on the light. Yep. And so much of what I hear, even in the political world, is just attacking the other side. I want somebody to tell me, so what? What are you going to do about it? What are we going to do? Are we just going to give up? Are we just going to throw in the towel? Are we just going to give up on the next generation and generations following? Are we going to watch our education departments fall to pieces and our economy fall to pieces? Or are we going to stand up? And I just preached this past Sunday. God raised up a guy named Asa in the Old Testament, and God gave him a simple. This is a biblical sentence. God said, "Arise, build, and prosper." And I think that's a message that America particularly needs to hear right now. Is don't just tell me how bad the left is and all that they're doing. And man, we all know, we all see it. It's no longer just out there somewhere in secret in darkness, but there is a real destruction of family and everything good, that this nation is about freedom and all of it. But we've got to do more than just talk about what bad people are doing. We've got to build, and then we'll prosper. Rebuild all of it. Start again. Believe again. Have faith again.
I think that's such an important point. And I think for me personally, it's really what drove me to America First Policy Institute, right? Because I think a lot of folks, as you indicated, can tell you how bad it is. And I don't know that you need people to tell you how bad it is. You just look around and look at the news and look at a number of concerning things. But the question is, what should we do about it? And the work that we're doing here at AFPI, and you're involved in some of that work, which we'll talk about here in a minute, I think is a really important point of answering the question, okay, well, what comes next? How do we get ourselves out of a variety of different situations that we're in to not only bring us back to that Christian faith, but also put us back onto a prosperous economy and a good life once again. So with that, I know that you're involved in an initiative here at AFPI. It's called Biblical Foundations. Would love to just get your thoughts on that. And just for our listeners out there, Biblical Foundation says, hey, we're going to take an America First policy agenda, right? So we can talk about the economy, we can talk about the border, we can talk about faith, we can talk about all these different things, and then we marry that with those biblical foundations that we find in the Scripture and others that tells us why this is important and how to move forward. But would love to get obviously you've got a unique perspective on this and why you think this is so important, Pastor.
Well, I think because so many voices now are saying to pastors, particularly, and I'll talk from my vantage point, my world that I'm in, that somehow politics, that's a subject that should never be discussed. It should never be brought up. If you get controversial about any issues, you're not doing God's work. And I totally disagree with that. I believe that every problem has spiritual roots. Every problem that is destroying lives and destroying our nation has biblical answers and has spiritual roots, either evil roots or good roots. And the solution is found in the Bible. So I think these foundations, when you understand God does have an economic plan, God does have, these plans and if we can get good people to run, honest people and people who will do the job and tell the truth and look you face to face and tell you like it is, like we all know, that a lot of the things that are going on are terrible. And it's like there's just a spin all the time, a spin on the truth, a spin on everything that's being done. And I just think right now the world is crying. And I've learned that the thing that fills our seats, our churches are back. Our churches are full, all of them, and capacity. And we're adding services, not taking them away. But it's because, we have to stand and scratch where people itch. I think a lot of people just, they go to church and they hear sermons and they hear messages about things that have nothing to do with their lives. But when we're truly preaching the Word of God, it builds up. And that's what I love about the foundations, because the foundations, Biblical Foundations Initiative teaches pastors and young preachers, we're not trying to take the voice of God. We're trying to show them that there are biblical roots in everything this nation is built on. And once you understand that Constitution has connections to the Word of God, and even our founders, made statements like John Adams said, the Bible contains the most profound philosophy, the most perfect morality, and the most refined policy that ever was conceived upon the earth. And George Washington, our first president, said religion and morality are indispensable and they must never be lost in America. these are what our founders believed. Why have we gotten so far away from that? And my belief is there's a lot of young preachers out there that need to see some of the older guys like me and others take a firm stand. We've been doing that. We've been working privately with these pastors. We've been meeting with hundreds of pastors across the nation over the past few years. But more and more I'm finding as I gather about once every 2 or 3 months by invitation, 30 or 40 young pastors. And I take a day, Chad, and just pour into them and teach them these biblical foundations and say, here's why we stand for life. Here's why we stand with Israel. Here's why we stand for, marriage. And I believe in freedom. I believe in live and let live. I think transgender, if people want to live that way, they have a right in America that can't be said in a Muslim nation, that can't be said in other nations around the world, like in Russia or wherever. But in America, you can live like you want to live. But when you come and try to teach my children that this is normal and it must be taught as normal, even in the curriculum in schools, it's time for a clear voice with biblical foundations to stand up and say, no, this is what we believe, and this is what has made us a great nation. You can live that way, but that's you can do what you want to do in America. But we believe what we believe, and freedom of religion is a major part of what we believe, and it is in every part of our society.
Yeah, that's really true. You were talking about the founders and how much they understood that the Constitution of the United States and our Declaration of Independence and the rights that were given to us by God and secured by government, that those things came from the Scriptures and that Judeo-Christian foundation. But we've seen recently some major attacks on the new Speaker of the House for his Christian faith, for his willingness to speak up and out about, they asked him, what do you believe? He said, well, if you read the Bible, that's what I believe. There's so many calls for that he's being a Christian nationalist, or he's trying to build a theocracy. And as a pastor that speaks on these issues, how do you try and articulate or respond to this claim that we're trying to build some sort of Christian theocracy or national religious party because we believe that the Bible was a foundational part of the American experiment?
Yeah, it's just nonsense. And I'm afraid that too many of us in pulpits have allowed that philosophy to sink in and to seep in. And if the only way to combat it is you have to find your voice and speak up.
Yeah.
This is not a time to be silent. This is not, the Bible talks about watchmen who see encroaching upon cities and their nation evil, and they don't speak up. The Bible calls them a dumb dog that will not bark. If you've got a good dog and something evil's coming up to your front doorstep, it'll start barking if somebody's coming to do damage. And I think the pulpits of America, as the pulpit goes, so the nation goes. And that's one thing that AFPI is so powerful and beautiful and unique, really, in this area, because they encourage pastors. They believe in that faith is you can't make America great again without making God great again. And that's fine if you want to be an atheist, but you cannot come and steal our rights and tell us what we can and cannot teach our children. And that's why AFPI, whether they're fighting for choice and in education, whether they're fighting for the homeschooling parents that by the millions that are choosing to educate their children with biblical foundations, this organization is on the forefront, in my opinion. And yes, my son does work for you, but I'm going to tell you, even if my son wasn't working for this great organization, I'm thrilled to say it's important what the work you're doing is. And pastors, my big thing to pastors is find your voice.
Yeah.
Speak up. Moses was asked or ask the people who's on the Lord's side. At some point, you can't just kind of tiptoe through everything going on in our nation. I think and what I found is when I have a clear voice and I stand clearly on the issues that the Word of God is clear on, like life, like freedom, and all of these wonderful foundations that you guys have so beautifully laid out. When we take firm stands on these issues, we're not preaching Republican and Democrat. We're not preaching left or right. We're preaching the Bible. And when you stand for the Bible, then there's a clear approach, and people are yearning for it. People are longing for that clarity. They're seeing the damage of this cloudy and this silent, sit back and just hope things get better attitude that many have. And if ever there was an hour to stand strong and clear and speak up, it's in this hour.
Well, I love that slogan. I mean, it really could be the slogan for AFPI and probably for a lot of other folks right now, which is, now is not a time to be silent. And I think you certainly described that so well. And that kind of leads us to a different issue, but yet related, right? And I think over the last couple of years, we've seen a weaponization of the federal government kind of directed at a couple of different entities, but one has certainly been, I think, generally people of faith. And it kind of ties in with what Adam asked you as well, where the left seems to be almost targeting people of faith for a variety of different reasons. And we've seen this with the Catholic Church. We've seen this with pregnancy resource centers being targeted by the IRS. And, kind of the list goes on and on and on. But would love to, of course, we follow this, right? This is what we do at AFPI, making sure that, the American people come first. But would love to get your sense, Pastor, as you talk with your congregation and just everywhere you go, are folks really tuned in on this issue of maybe the federal government now is using its levers in a way that doesn't appear to be very balanced? And is this something that they're really concerned about?
Yeah, I really think they are. I really think there's a real awakening going on in the trenches, and people are, it almost sounds unbelievable. You just never thought these things could happen in America. You never thought you would see the FBI and the IRS weaponized against churches and against priests and against pastors. And you never thought you would see this kind of really persecution is what it is. And I think, yes, absolutely, people. And when we see it as leaders, when we see it and get up and speak and take the scriptures and say, this is what the Bible says about this kind of activity, and this is where it leads, and this is where historically it takes a nation. People are beginning to see now that, this is real. This is not people who are just being extreme, and, this is not a little pocket over here, but this is really happening in our government. And if we don't take control and really purge and cleanse these elements out, and I would even say, it can't happen should the right get power again, and should conservatives get power again. I would be against that as much, doing that against a liberal organization as I would be a conservative organization, because evil is just evil. That's evil. It's wrong. It's un-American. It's unconstitutional. It's unbiblical.
I think that's right. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's not a Republican, it's not a Democrat issue, right? This is just a fundamental issue. And I think that's, I've got 2 kids, and you talk to them about the history of the country, and religious persecution is, in part what the country was founded on, and folks fleeing from that. And when you see that today, I think that gives a lot of us that perhaps are a little bit older, and have some perspective of where the country came from, gives us a lot of pause. And as you said, it's
think about where we are even now. And I was riding in my car over to my office this morning, and I heard some of the students at New York University and one kid at Harvard, and they're Jewish, and they were talking about the persecution and the fear, the absolute fear that they are living in on their campuses, and how they're hiding in the rooms. The Jewish students are being so discriminated about. Anti-Semitism is so prevalent on campuses, and the administrations of those universities sit silent. They're basically being weaponized by radical groups that they're blatant now. They're saying death to Jews and calling them rats and calling them names. You should, if you get a chance, hear what these students and the fear that young kids, 17, 18, 20-year-old kids are terrified, Jewish kids, here in America, in major educational universities. This is how far this weaponization has gone. And if we think as Christians that can't happen to us in our communities, we're crazy.
Yeah, that's a really great example of what happens when you don't have a Judeo-Christian worldview incorporated into your politics. Right. Because if you understood the Judeo-Christian values and the inerrancy of, or the value of all human life and the brotherhood that the Jews and the Christians share historically, you would never allow the kind of stuff these universities are allowing to happen. They put their own political opinions above the well-being of their students and the well-being of an entire population of people, primarily because they don't have a biblical worldview. If they had a biblical worldview, these Jewish people would be protected in their own schools and in their own homes, but they're not. And that is the lack of a biblical worldview on display in these major cities.
Well, I think it's not only that, Adam. I think that's a great point. We'd love to get the pastor's view, but it's also, what we've seen is, and of course they hide behind free speech, right? They hide behind we're a place, an educational institution, higher ed, to give everyone, but we've seen that in the past. That's just not
evenly applied.
Right. I mean, it's not evenly applied, but it certainly just is not applicable here either. So it's such a good topic to talk about, because I think what we're seeing, and the pastor brought it up, on college campuses and university campuses today is it's hard to look at. Hard to look at.
Well, and what I love about AFPI is the way that they, you don't just talk about the problems again. You don't just curse the darkness. You turn on the light. Yeah. And I know one of the initiatives of AFPI is to make sure that Christian and conservative voices can still be heard on campuses, because they're being censored. They're being silenced. The truth of our Judeo-Christian roots are not being shared in even debates. It's more and more. And so, some of the great things and work that AFPI does that I love, and I'll just speak for myself and appreciate, I know that you have programs now that are designated to reach universities, with Christian voices and conservative voices, and bring that counterbalance to just hearing one side of the story. Probably the truth is somewhere in the middle, but if you're not hearing any side but one radical side, right, it's dangerous.
Right.
And Spotlight, I think it's a time where we need to be challenging good people. And that's, again, I don't mean to keep talking about AFPI, but this is what comes to my mind.
I love it.
Oh, that's okay. You keep talking.
Well, when I think of your organization, I think of the quality of people. It's like I know the price that you've paid. I know when you served in the previous administration, Chad, and the heat that you took for the good work you were doing on the border. It right. was completely lied about in the press, but you were saving lives. You were saving girls from being trafficked, teenage girl. I mean, all of that was basically shut down because we had a secure border. Drugs, fentanyl was not pouring in, killing 100,000 American young people. You guys you had it down to a trickle. And then comes a new administration that tears all of it down, and we have the result that we have today. And you guys were ostracized. You were attacked. I can't imagine how your kids were treated and if they go to public schools and, they're just hearing one side. My point is the only answer now is to have quality people who know how to govern, who take it as a call really on their life, a purpose, whatever, an assignment, whatever you want to call it. It is their passion. And they get in there and they know how to do it. And that's why I love AFPI. There's so many experience. It's one thing to, if I'm going to have surgery, I don't want the guy who looks like Dr. McDreamy, if he's never operated on my body. I don't want him going into I want a doctor. I don't care if he looks like a nerd. I don't care if his glasses are thick. If he's done the operation and he can get it done and he's done it successfully, that's the one I want to do the job on me. When I think of AFPI, I think of in every area of government, professional people with deep convictions. They are not a question mark. They're an exclamation point for what they believe this nation is supposed to do and be, and they have a record of achieving it. That's what excites me. You give them the reins again and watch what will happen.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate those comments. Obviously, I get asked a lot from a lot of different folks, and it goes to your point, Pastor, which is they often ask, well, how was it serving in the Trump administration to be unfairly targeted and attacked and children and all that? And, I can always talk to him about that, but it all comes back really to one point, which is, and this comes from growing up in the Catholic Church and elsewhere, is you've got to have a good moral compass is how I talk about it.
That's it.
You've got to know what is right from wrong, and that guides you, and then everything else flows from that. And if you don't have that compass and you are conflicted about what is right and what is wrong, that's where problems, and I think, frankly, that's what we're seeing today.
Yeah. Pastor, one of the things I've so admired about you through the years in public ministry is just how well you speak up and speak out, and that anywhere the light withdraws, the darkness comes in.
That's right.
And how you've spoken to your congregation and talked to your people and really fathered and loved them well over the years. I'd like to know a little bit about what you see as some of the top issues that your congregation is struggling with all the different things that are going on in the nation. Kind of give us a better sense of, what are the everyday Americans experiencing and feeling from a pastoral care perspective.
Well, I don't think it'll be any different in the church world than it is in regular society. I mean, we're seeing inflation reap havoc on the American family. And that is, I mean, we're feeding, we have two major feedings now. And by the way, one of the great things that the Trump administration did was they had a feeding program, Farmers to Tables, I think it was called, or something like that. And it was amazing. They would bring in food for those who were needy, and it would shock you. I could show you. We distribute 225 to 250,000 pounds of food every month. We've been doing this for years and years and years. Wow. And we thank God we're able to pay for that food. But under the previous administration, there was a group of farmers who got together with the government, just common sense stuff, just unbelievably simple ideas of so much food was being wasted. So much groceries were going to be wasted. And so President Trump and the administration goes and finds a method and a way to get the food from the farmers that would be wasted to the people in need, and they use churches as distribution centers, and it worked magnificently. And now that program, of course, has vanished for the most part, and we are able to fund it in our church, but not all churches could do that. My point is, number one, the inflation is killing families, destroying, it keeps going, interest rate on homes and cars and all of it. We're really seeing that affect the when that begins to happen, you start having trouble in the marriage, you start having trouble with the kids, and the everything gets escalated. So that's one thing I would say. A major concern is mental health. That it doesn't seem like the government gets it, but mental health right now is unbelievably, and these are areas the church can play a vital role in.
That's right.
And there was a real partnership that was taking place with churches with the previous administration. I hope that we can, and I know AFPI does a lot of great work in helping bridge that. I think, another major concern would be school choice. And we're just losing every day more and more confidence. Man, I've got so many wonderful principals in the public schools in our church, and teachers. I respect them, I love them, but the teachers' unions are so radical, and it's the leadership over those organizations that are destroying our educational systems. And I would also say that there needs to be a strong deliberate attempt to recruit people from faith communities to serve on school boards. I'm getting up and hitting that one all the time. We've got to rethink everything. We've got to harvest votes. We've got to have our churches as voter registration centers. We've got to talk about these things. We can't be quiet anymore. I'm tired of losing. And it's time for us to lead in these areas. So that's things that I'm passionate about, and I know AFPI is.
Well, we certainly are. I think all of those topics that you just hit on, but particularly, how the American family has really come under attack in a variety of different ways. I think that's a salient issue, and I think a lot of people around the country are feeling that as well. Pastor, we could talk for probably another couple hours, but I know you're a busy man.
Yeah, one thing that I overlook would be parents' rights.
Yes,
that's a real passion right now, a button that you can push. That parents are fed up with, these radical far left philosophies saying we raise your children, we have decisions about everything, and your rights are being diminished. That's I think there's a real opportunity to capitalize on that and say we the people will decide what our children are taught and how they're raised.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think we've seen that issue really bubble up again over these past 2.5 to 3 years, because we've seen it attacked time and time again, whether you're attacking parents for going to school board meetings or telling parents that they're public education systems in charge of their children and they aren't. So time and time again, I think that you're attacking parents or cutting them out. That goes to the heart of the American family. So I think those are all incredibly important points. We want to make sure we get you out of here on time, but as we celebrate, we've got the holiday season coming up, obviously Christmas and a variety of different ones. I think this is a time of the season and the time of the year. I think people do look to the, whether it's to your individual church, your synagogue, wherever it is that you may practice, and look to pastors and elsewhere for a sense of encouragement. So we'd love to give you the last word here and have you take us out on, as this holiday season comes upon us, what's some of the things that you'll be, talking about with your congregation? Love to get a little preview of that.
Well, it is a wonderful time of the year, and that is when we all realize that God loves us, and he loves us so much that he didn't leave us here alone, but he clothed himself in flesh when the first astronaut went to the moon and set his feet on the moon and planted his human feet on the moon. The president at that time of the United States said the planting of human feet upon the moon is the greatest event in human history. And I would respectfully disagree with that president, because I believe the greatest event in human history was when God planted his feet on earth in a little barn in Bethlehem. Jesus Christ was God in skin. He came to this earth. He never preached a sermon for 30 years. He did not come as a lawyer. He did not come as a politician. He did not come as a doctor. He came he was a builder for 30 years. He came to build. He came to build up, not tear down. Build up lives, build up marriages, build up hope and dreams and faith and purpose. And he came to die. He shed his blood. He died on the cross at the age of 33 and rose from the dead. And he says, I still have a plan. There's still hope. He comes to reconcile our homes and our families. Christmas can be a time when, you can be stressed out, or you can have peace and you can understand there's no family that's perfect. There's no family that is ideal, but all of our families are loved by God, and we can love one another. Love never fails, and you can love like you've never been hurt. And God can reconcile our families, our life, our world, and our nation. And that's what I'm praying for this Christmas. I pray for everyone who's listening to this. There's hope. God can restore marriages, families, futures. And he's a good God. He loves us, and he's waiting on us to just call on him, and he will help us.
Well, that's a fantastic message. Beautiful message. I appreciate you sharing that. And listeners can find Pastor Jensen Franklin at Free Chapel. He's on Instagram at Jensen. Probably one of the smartest, insightful individuals I've had the opportunity to come across. So I encourage all our listeners to seek him out, and you can listen to the good word that he does each and every week. Pastor, I want to thank you again for being on the tank, for joining the show today and bringing a little different insight than we normally cover on the program. So what a pleasure to have you on. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to be with you guys.
Text the word TANK to 70107. That's TANK to 70107 to get exclusive content from the Tank podcast and to learn more about the America First Policy Institute.